My YouTube channel, and today we are going to be looking at unit testing, and we are going to be doing that with a React framework. So what we have here is an application. It's just a simple React application that has a button, and it has a decrement button and an increment button. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a folder, and I'm going to call that folder, I'm just going to call it the test folder, and how we name this is _test _. Under that folder, I am going to be creating another component, and I'm going to be calling that the counter.test.js. You can choose to call it anything, but I chose to call it counter.test.js. So we are going to be using the Jest library, and just so you know, the Jest library is also part of a dependencies that comes with React application. So as you can see, we have that in our package.json. So we are just going to be importing some functions, and the first function is going to be the render function, and we are going to be importing also the fire event function as well as the screen function, and we're going to be importing it from React test library. So now we are going to be using, or we also need to import our counter component that we want to test as well. So after this, the Jest library has a method called test. So we are going to be using that for this application. So we're just going to pass in increment counter, and that is just going to take in an arrow function. And so we are just going to render some components in the virtual DOM. And so the whole purpose of this is to test each of our elements. So we've got the increment button and we've got the decrement button. So we want to test each of them. So we are going to be using the render function that we imported as well. And the function will be used to make assertions about its state. So we are just going to comment, and we're going to have the render component in the virtual DOM, and then we can call in the render method, and inside the render method we will be passing our counter component. So we have the counter component there, and the next thing we want to do is we want to also select the elements from the elements to interact with. In order for us to do this, we need to actually go into the counter component and then set each element and give it an ID. So we're just going to give that data-test ID, and then we are going to set that to something increase. We could just call it increase. And so for each data test ID, it enables us to test each element in our counter.test.js file. So we are going to just set the counter paragraph element, and we're just going to also give that data-test ID, and we are going to set that to, we're just going to give that a number as well. And then we are going to set the second decrement button, and same thing, we are just going to give that decrease as well. So now we have set all of our test IDs. We have test IDs in our counter components. So now we can go back to our counter test.js file, and we can then select the elements we want to interact with. And how we would do this is that we will create a const and we'll set that to counter, and we will use our screen function that we imported earlier on. So we would just have our counter set to equal to screen, and we will have screen dot get by. We want to use the get by test ID. And we want to make sure that we are using the right ID for the right element. So the first ID was the increase button, which was the increment button, and that ID was set to increase. So just to make sure, we can always go back to double check if you're not sure. So we can just go back and we just want to double check that that was actually set to increase. So we can go back to our counter.test.js file, and we also want to set the so we actually set that to number, not increase. So we can change that as well. So the next one we want to make sure, the next element is the increment button. So we set that to increment button, and we also use the screen function as well. So we just say screen dot get by test ID, and for the increment button, we had set that earlier to increase. So and then we want to interact with the, what's it called? We want to interact with the elements. And to interact with the elements, another function we imported earlier on was the fire event. So we are going to be using the fire event. So we are just going to be calling that, and we're saying fire event dot click. And we are going to be referencing the increment button variable we had created earlier on. And then we use the, there's another assertion function in Jest library. We use the expect. So basically, we want it to behave the way we had created the application. So we use that expect function, and then we can use the counter. So we'll put in our counter dot, and we want to say to have the text content, and we expect that to have a text content of 2 because it's the increment button. Initially at the beginning of the application, we set that to 1. And just a reminder, the React framework does come with an app.test.js file, so we can actually delete that file. We don't need it. So what we want to now do is run our test. So we'll say npm. Oh, I need to cd into the directory. So just cd unit testing, and then I can say npm run test. I'm not actually expecting this to pass, but we would see why this wouldn't, why this would fail, why this test would fail. So as you can see, our test actually failed. So remember, the whole idea of unit testing is to make sure that each individual component, element, or functions behave as expected. But what happened here was the framework, the library got confused because I had labeled that as with a capital letter C. So it got confused, and it didn't know which was the right counter I was referring to. So I have corrected that now, and then we are going to run that again. So we have npm run test, and if we try that again, I didn't cd into our folder, so I'm just going to cd into, unit testing. And so just doing unit testing, and then I can run npm run test. Not run dev, run test. So now we are just going to wait and see what we get. It does take a while to test. And we see that it passed this time. So it means that our elements are behaving just as expected. So there's also another way of actually testing. So if we change that to 1, let's just try that. So because we had set our increment button, our use state to 1, that should fail, because what we want is that when the button is clicked, it should give us number 2. So as you can see, that failed. So it means that our element is behaving just the way we want it to behave. So we can also try another number. We can just try maybe number 3. And if we try to run that, we can see that would fail as well. Well, it's expected to fail because obviously, yeah. So we'll just change that back to 2. And there is another way of actually testing using the describe method. So in the describe method, we are going to be using an arrow function, which is give that counter, and then using the arrow function. So we're just going to also, we've got another method called it. So we are going to be using the it method, and and that would be, so we can take that out. We would not need that, and we can just copy, because we are going to be using the same method, the same function that we had used for the test method. So we're just going to copy that out, and then use the heat method, and then in that we'll just say should increment counter, and then also that will follow by the arrow function, and we can paste the function we had written earlier on. And so just take out that part, and we can save this, and we can try the test again. So basically, these are different ways that we could use in testing each of our elements. Not just elements, but we can also use, so if we have multiple components, we can also use this method, the describe method, to actually test each component, and just to make sure that they behave in the exact way we want them to behave. So this is kind of like taking a while, but we'll just wait for it. Okay, at the end, yes, we did get a pass. And so what we want to do next is that we've tested the increment button, and what we want to do next is to actually test the decrement button. So we are just going to be using a const and setting a decrement button, and we are also going to be using the screen function, and we're just going to say screen dot get test ID, and we set the test ID for decrement button to decrease. We have to make sure that we use the exact ID that we gave it in our components. And so the next thing I want to do is I would want to reference the so just so we have two separate testing functions for both increment and decrement, I'm just going to copy that one so that we can have full decrement as well. And then I am just going to reference the decrement button there on the fire event.click. So and the next thing I want to do, because in this function I no longer need the increment button, so we can just take that out because now we want to test for the decrement button. So we have that, and we have so we want to set that to 0. That's simply because when we expect a 0, we're just going to run that. We expect a 0 because it's a decrement button, and remember it was set to 1, so we expect it to be decreased with 0 anyway. So but yeah, we see that actually passed. Well, we can also try to see if our test is working, and we can also change that number from 0 to until another number. So we'll just change that to something else, and let's just wait and see the results of what it gives us. I'm not expecting it to pass, but let's just see what that result gives us. So that actually failed. So these are just the way we actually do unit testing. It's very essential for our software applications because we want to make sure that not just the components, but every aspect of our application, every element also works. Also too, there are times whereby we also need to test. It's not just elements, it's not just buttons that we could test. We could also test things like strings, different paragraphs in our application, which is it's very useful. The next thing I want to do is that I want to use another function called the snapshots. So basically, I'm just going to be using the same describe method, and I'm going to be having the counter snapshots and also giving it an arrow function, and also using the it methods. And I would just say there should it match the DOM snapshot, and also right there in that function we could just use an arrow function. So basically what the snapshots will do is that it will give us a snapshot of our UI. So but let's just test this out and let's see for ourselves. So after we have that, after we do that, we also want to install a library. So we need to install I'm just going to cd into my my folder, which is unit testing, and we want to install a library called the React Test Render. And this is basically going to assist us in actually carrying out the snapshot test function. So now we've installed our React Test Render. We need to import that into our counter.test.js file. So we'll just say import render, and that will be import render from React Test Render. Yeah. So now we can come back and say const data is equal to And then we can call in the render function, and we can just say renderer dot create, and we want to pass in our component. So we want to pass in the counter component that we are testing, and then we want to have that to JSON. So we would just say dot. We'll just give that dot to JSON, and then we want to use the assertion, which is the expect. So we say expect, and then we can call in our data, and we want that to, and then we can call it the method, which is to match our snapshots, and we want that to match our snapshots. So what this has done, it has created a folder for us. It has created a folder for us in our source files, as you can see. So we want to run our test, and we would have npm run test. So just gonna wait for that to run. Oops, that failed. I forgot to cd into our file. So I'm just gonna cd into unit testing file, and then I can actually rerun the test again. So I'm gonna have npm run tests. So we can now, we're just going to wait for the time. Yes, it does take a while, I know. Okay, so that passed. So what this will do is it will create a snapshot of our UI. So we have that there, and we can see that it matches what we have in our component. That's basically what this means. But how do we know that? How do we know? I mean, let's try something. What if I go and put in a different data? So I just put something like data in that paragraph element, for example. Let's see, would our test still fail? Let's just try that. So we are just gonna wait for that, and so we can see that that actually failed. So basically, it's that can also be updated, but we don't want that. We want to keep it just as it is. So that is how we usually do the unit testing for components, for elements, and all of it. So what we've achieved so far is that we have actually tested our elements in our simple unit testing application. We tested the increment button, we tested the decrement button as well. Thank you for watching.